As I predicted, in early 2024, a major war has broken out between Iran and Israel. As of Saturday, June 14th, at around 10:20, which is when I'm recording this video, both Israel and Iran are trading extremely heavy blows. So far, even though both sides have managed to lay some pretty heavy blows on each other, the Israelis definitely have shown that they have a strategic and a tactical advantage in this war. If the Israelis continue to press their advantage, at some point we're going to have to ask ourselves whether the Iranians are going to pull a major ace that they have under their sleeve that could really change the entire complexion of this conflict. That ace card consists of shutting down all commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, and in particular, oil tanker traffic. In other videos that are in my oil shock playlist, and which I'm going to link to right here, I have explained that if Iran were to block commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, this could cause an oil price shock. It could cause oil prices to rise potentially to up to $300 or even more, which would trigger a global economic recession. In this video, I just want to focus on the narrow subject of why and under what circumstances would the Iranians decide to pull this ace card and shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the first thing that I want to make clear in this video is that shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is an option that the Iranians would rather not have to take advantage of. The main reason why the Iranians would rather not shut down the Strait of Hormuz is that essentially that would make the entire world their enemy, and in particular, their neighbors in the Persian Gulf who are oil exporters and need to get their oil out of the Persian Gulf, such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and Oman, and some other nations in the Persian Gulf, including Iraq. They would be really harmed by the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, and it would turn these countries into enemies of Iran. It would also turn China into an enemy of Iran, since China is a major importer of oil coming out of the Middle East. It would turn the Europeans into an enemy of Iran, since they get a lot of their oil from the Persian Gulf. So in principle, the Iranians don't want to turn the whole world against them. The option of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz would be an option of desperation. In other words, if the regime in the Islamic Republic of Iran believes that it's going to lose the war, and it believes that its very existence is at stake because the regime may actually be toppled and another regime may come to replace it through a revolution, then the regime might resort to blocking the Strait of Hormuz out of an act of desperation. Now, what would be their reasoning? The reasoning would be that if they block the Strait of Hormuz and global oil prices shoot up, then there will be enormous international pressure to bring an end to the war. And bringing an end to the war would basically involve getting Israel to stop its military activities against Iran. So the Iranians would basically be betting on the idea that they could be saved if they shut the Strait of Hormuz and the rest of the world puts pressure on Israel to declare a ceasefire or an end to the conflict. So closure of the Strait of Hormuz would be a desperate act of self-preservation on the part of the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, as I point out in some of my other videos, the Iranians have actually been preparing for a scenario like this for something like 20 years. They have accumulated a great deal of technology. They've trained their armed forces. They've developed asymmetric tactics that would definitely enable them to close the Strait of Hormuz for a very long period of time and cause this type of massive spike in global oil prices. And over the years, the Iranians have been very clear that they're willing to resort to this option if they're pressed up against a wall. And just on Saturday, there was a couple of Iranian officials that actually said publicly that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is something that's being actively considered by the Iranian leadership at this time. In addition, Just in the last few months, the IRGC's naval commander has said repeatedly that the IRGC has the capability and it's ready to block the Strait of Hormuz on the orders of the political echelon within Iran. In fact, the current president of Iran has said that if Iran is not allowed to export its oil to the rest of the world, that Iran is not going to allow any of its neighbors in the Middle East to export their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, the Iranians think that they have the means of blackmail in the event of an emergency that actually threatens their regime that will get the rest of the world to get the Israelis to stop their attacks on the Iranians. But here's the problem. The Israelis have been very clear that until they have accomplished their strategic objectives, they're not stopping. Their main and number one strategic objective is to eliminate the threat of Iran becoming a nuclear armed power. They want to destroy all of Iran's nuclear capability, and they also want to destroy all of Iran's long-range missile capabilities. But the other goal that the Israelis ultimately want to accomplish, even though they're not saying this out loud as much, is that they want regime change. They want the current regime in Iran to be overthrown. And they don't want to stop this conflict until they see an overthrow of this regime for as long as this regime stays in power. Therefore, it's not going to be easy at all for the rest of the world to convince the Israelis to halt their attacks on the Iranians. In addition, if the Americans get involved, potentially because Iran strikes at military targets of the United States that are in the Middle East, and the United States actually gets actively involved in this war, then it becomes even more likely that the joint goal of Israel and the United States will be to effect some sort of regime change, because the United States actually knows, despite everything that Donald Trump has said that he's not interested in regime change, they know that the Iranians will remain a mortal enemy of the United States forever until this regime is overthrown. Finally, let's ask the question, how close are we to this possibility that the Iranians could try to close the Strait of Hormuz? Actually, I think we're getting pretty close, because the Israelis definitely have the strategic and the tactical advantage right now. They have the initiative right now. The Iranians are being defeated, even though the Iranians have managed to get some of their hypersonic missiles through Israel's Iron Dome defense and have managed to hurt the Israelis. The Israelis definitely have the strategic advantage, and their regime is in real danger right now. So even though there's no guarantee that this will ever happen, it's also true that this could happen in just a matter of days, because things are transpiring very, very quickly right now. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about in this video is, what should you do about this as an investor? And I have two separate services. I have one service on Seeking Alpha called Successful Portfolio Strategy, where I manage a conservatively managed portfolio, where we're taking advantage of exactly this situation right now by investing in certain types of things that will benefit from this scenario that's currently going on. And I have a much more aggressive trading service that trades options that's called the Crisis Opportunity Portfolio. And that's on investораcumen.com. This particular portfolio uses options to make gains in excess of 100%, several 100%, taking advantage of the situation that's going on right now. But of course, it's a much more risky portfolio, but it's one that can make gains of several 1,000%, such as what happened during the COVID crisis, where my options portfolio made some really massive gains. So thanks very much for joining me. And in my next video, I'm going to go into depth on how the Iranians can actually shut down the Strait of Hormuz. In this video, we discussed why they would want to do this and if they would do it and under what circumstances they would do it. And in my next video, I want to discuss how they could actually get this done. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.